All right, ready?
Just a sec.
Are you tweeting it out?
Yeah.
All right, grab it. Yep, here we are.
Oh, that's fun.
We want to
Dan,
try something new today.
what company were you at
I I was
back
at
in your
the
PC
I
days?
was at Ericom for a long time back. They got purchased, by the way. But after I left, just a sec. Try talking from the.
I think you go back to like my Gartner days. It was like 15 years ago.
I'll be done in 1 second. Here
And see, what
okay. We can start.
oh, we're recording.
All right, hold on. Where is it going? Hello, everybody, and welcome to another exciting episode of JavaScript Jabber. I am Steve Edwards, the host with the face for radio and the voice for being your mime, excuse me, but I'm the host. At least I am today. With me on the panel, I have coming with us live from Tel Aviv, Israel, Mr. Dan Shapir. How you doing, Dan?
I'm doing well. I'm perfectly fine with you being my mime. I could use a mime.
Yes, a mime is a terrible thing to waste, as they used to say. So, how's the weather in Tel Aviv? We always have to talk about this. Is it still
Well,
warm and hot and dry and
guess.
lovely?
Well, I don't know about lovely, but it is hot. It's humid because we're on the Mediterranean.
Oh, you
But
got the
yeah,
humidity too. Okay.
yeah, but yeah, on the other hand, we've got the beach, so
Oh, so nice, so nice.
among
And
some of the nicer things that we have among the also lots of not so nice things we recently have, but that's a topic for a different discussion.
yes, exactly. And coming as our special guest today is Mr. Gunnar Berger. How you doing, Gunnar?
Doing all right? How are you, Steve?
I'm doing great. While these voice messages come on my phone. So, we are here to talk today about vibe coding, that hot topic across the web and across the world these days, at least in the tech space. Before we get into the topic, Gunnar, can you give us a little background on yourself?
Sure. Full background or vibe coding background, or I'm a
Whatever you deem relevant to the topic at hand.
whatever I
Let's put
deem
it that
relevant.
way.
All right, sure. I'm a true nerd. Been a nerd for 20 plus years. Been in tech industry for 20 plus years. First half of my career is centered in IT, traditional IT. Switched over about 15 years ago. I was a Gartner analyst for a while. I covered end user computing. That's where Dan and I met. I went over to Citrix, was there for about 6 years. I've been currently now at Amazon, been here about 6 years. And I've been leading product in some form or another. It constantly changes, but I've been doing some form of products for a while now. At Citrix, I would say more new product initiatives, MPI. I always kind of joked that our CEO, Mark Templeton, would always have like, and one more thing on stage at Synergy. That's typically where the CTO department would have something to do with that and one more thing. So I did a lot of MPI, mergers, acquisitions, that kind of stuff at Citrix. Um, and yeah, and I jumped over to product, which is where I've been ever since. Yeah, and so I'm really interested in this topic because I think the definition of product manager, or at Amazon we hire product PMTs, product manager technicals, um, and I lead a team of these professionals. And I think that that definition is changing rapidly because of what AI is empowering product managers to do. So yeah, I thought it'd be really fun to have a conversation with technical people about this. Coming as kind of a, I'm a nerd technical, but I'm definitely not like a developer technical.
So I would like to add to that. Gunnar, if you recall, we kind of started talking about you coming on the show after I posted on X kind of a shout out inviting people who are involved with vibe coding in some form or shape to come on our show to talk about it. And about a month ago, we had Anthony Campolo talking about vibe coding from the developer perspective. So I thought it would be great to have somebody coming in at it from a different perspective, one of product management, because I think, again, looking at product managers in the company that I work at, Sisense, and other companies I talk to, other people who are in product management, I do see it making a whole lot of impact. And I do think that one of the most impacted fields are developers and product people, but they're impacted in somewhat different ways, although there are a lot of similarities. So I thought your take on this, your point of view, would be very pertinent to our listeners.
I think it's interesting that even I'm assuming your listeners are typical, like in the development world, which is exactly kind of what I'm seeing happen within the product management world. It's like where those worlds are crossing more because it's almost like we spoke two different languages in the past, right? I speak the language of the customer, and where I work, we are very big writing culture. So I'm used to like, you write stories, you go deep to the customer, that world. But because of what this new technology has created, it's almost like having a translator with us at all times. Where now I'm speaking developer language, even though I'm not. Right? I'm vibing, and I think that has massive change to how we approach building products uh, throughout the industry. And I think everyone, a conversation I've had with a lot of my buddies at work is, if you had to start a new company today, would it look the same as if you did it 5 years ago? And I argue that it would not. Like, I'm sure we'll talk about what is the role of junior devs. How do you get senior devs in a world where junior devs don't have a job anymore? Like, so there's so many different directions we can come to this. But let me get one more dig in before you jump somewhere. I do want to have like a legal note here. I'm Gunner. I'm just here talking about my experience. I in no way am speaking on behalf of my company at all. So please don't edit that out of the podcast. Just make sure I'm required to have like a legal disclaimer that I'm just speaking on behalf of myself and the experience I have as this product
Well, I don't
By
know.
the
We
way,
just got a response to our tweet on JavaScript Jabber from the head of AWS that said, "Tell Gunner to be careful." No, I'm kidding. We didn't.
manager.
But
Go ahead, turn in my badge.
yeah, I do have to say that it's essentially the same for us. We're all here talking on behalf of ourselves, not
Mhm.
representing our employers. It's take our opinions for what they're worth. Um, Interestingly, I recently spoke with one of our senior developers slash architects at Sisense, and he's one of the people that has really bought into AI. He's the one using up all the tokens in his development environment. And the way he talked about it is how he feels in a lot of ways like he is becoming kind of product, working with a team of junior devs that he's instructing on what they should be doing and then critiquing their work.
Mhm.
So it is very interesting that we are coming at it from different perspectives, but it seems that they are kind of converging on this kind of a central place. But again, I'll hand it over to you to get your opinion on this.
Yeah, I mean, it's what is the output that a product manager should have these days? Like, I still think the input is very much the same. Like, you need to go deep with your customers, like be customer obsessed, understand what the problem is that you're trying to solve. Like, that's something that's still very firmly a product manager role. But then is what's the output? Well, previously the output is, writing a PRD, a business requirement doc, product requirement docs, uh, product feature request, whatever. It's in the world that I live in, it's always some form of a document that then we have a
Lots
meeting,
of paperwork.
right? And we have a meeting, and have a meeting with either my head of engineering or some SDEs, whoever it is, but someone on the development side, and we have conversations. They have questions, so then I go back and I modify my document. And maybe I'm doing focus group testing. Maybe I have a UX team coming in and sharing their perspective of how this thing should look, right? And just this is just how it works. This is in the industry. This is normal product management 101 stuff. And so we spend weeks, if not months, in meetings and doc reviews and back and forth, back and forth, back and forth, in what I like to call agile fall, because it's neither agile nor waterfall. But you're doing this over and over and over and over. Whereas that iteration changes. Everything changes when I can just go into a tool like Cursor, like Curo, like VS Code with some MCPs running. Like there's so many tools out there right now. Um, I can go in a tool and literally just like bullet point my thoughts. It's like this, and then have that tool take my thoughts, stretch them out, and either write me a better BRD that makes me think of, oh, I didn't think about, yeah, QA testing. I should have done that. Yeah, and it thinks about that for me, which is fantastic because then I add more questions. And now I'm having this back and forth from a product manager perspective with the AI on what are the requirements, like fully. What am I missing? Just ask the prompt. What am I missing? And it's like, well, did you think about this? So you have these better docs that are written in much, much faster times. But, and I think more importantly, I don't need to generate a doc. I still do. It's still kind of the expectation. But more often than not, I'm actually more interested in building a prototype, and working in sandbox environments and saying, you know what, I have this idea, let's just run with it. And I don't need a code review, I don't need security, all this kind of stuff, because I'm not a developer, right? But now I can develop, and I can actually show a working system to my development team, where now the handoff is not necessarily just a document, it is a working experience, a prototype that I vibed. And I think that's where things change. And then we have this whole question of like, what does that mean for developers? How many developers do you need if you're able to do quick prototyping? Like it used to be, I would maybe write a one pager up, send it to a junior dev. The dev like whips up a prototype in a sprint. We look at the prototype. Like we're talking weeks of time down to an afternoon for me. We're talking less communication errors, because now I'm actually showing you, not just telling you. I've said this multiple times, but never on a podcast. There's this phrase that a picture is worth 1,000 words. My, a prototype is worth 1,000 meetings. Just show me the thing that you're trying to build, and it shouldn't matter that the code is not that good. Like it doesn't matter. What matters, from a product standpoint, it's like, because I'm not trying to say build it like this, as far as like the code goes. I'm saying build it like this because this is how I fundamentally want this thing to work. And
So are you
that
saying then that it's from a, okay, you're saying, so the underlying code may not be what they want, but the UI, the appearance, the flow, this is what you're trying to give them the idea, and
the
gives
back
them
end,
the ideas.
the data.
Is the,
Yeah.
is the, how to say this? Is it very close to what you want as an end product, or is it I would assume this is just sort of, okay, this is a general idea of what I'm looking for. It's not going to be, fit and finish isn't going to be there. It's just sort of a general, yeah, this is what I want it to do so you can see it instead of me
Well,
describing it on paper.
that's just it. It depends. I would agree with what you said. The fit and finish doesn't necessarily have to be there, but at the same time, it depends how deep we go into using these AI agents. Like, okay, I got to be somewhat careful. Let's just say there's an MCP that exists that has my UI framework built into it. Well, now my fit and finish is my fit and finish. Now, is the code fit? I don't know. I'm not intelligent enough to tell you if the code is right, but I can tell you that the fit and finish, like when I pull it up on a browser, yeah, that's actually what the end result should look like, because I can use an AI that takes like a Figma and turns it into working code. That's public information, right? So taking advantage of these tools out there, like now all of a sudden, like my UI is my UI, even though it maybe only took me an afternoon to do it. I actually have a rich UI using the components, using everything that I wanted to use. But again, I do want to draw a really firm line that I'm not saying that the actual code makes any sense. Like
Oh
to
yeah,
me,
for
Yeah,
that's
we
sure.
literally
get that
free,
for sure. Yeah, we
right?
get that.
But the
Yeah.
fit and finish might, depending on the tools you're using, it
So
might
a few
actually look.
questions about that. So first of all, I totally agree with you and understand the concept that the code is not production ready. For example, it might not be secure. It might have, it might not require a login or anything. It just looks like there might not be issues like permissions and all this stuff, although you might actually vibe code some of that in order to show how that works if that's part of what you're designing. I totally get that, and I totally agree with that. I am curious about some other aspects, though. So, first of all, how likely are you actually going to be to try to actually connect it to real backend data versus just mocking some data? So that would be one question. Another question, you mentioned that you can take Figma designs, but will you actually even be waiting for the UX people to have the designs ready, or will you also kind of quote unquote jump the gun on them and say this is kind of, I'm not a developer, I'm also not a UX expert, but this is kind of like how I envision it working. I don't know if this is the
Yeah.
proper color scheme, if this is like um, it has accessibility and stuff like that. I just want to show you how I feel it should kind of look. So those are the
So
two questions that I have.
I come from a position of privilege here. I just want to be really clear about this. I have a UI framework, and in fact, I can pick from a set of UI frameworks that have a wonderful UX team behind them that are built on it. So your question of like, as a product manager, would I just like, hey, this is how it works? Honestly, like I would point it to an MCP of like, hey, using this framework, right, and go talk to this MCP about that framework. I can within a few minutes, I can have something like I don't know if you've messed with like Lovable AI or these other ones.
Yeah,
There's a
I have.
lot of these guys out there where they can actually give you the fit and finish that is aligned to your standards. So even accessibility, this is actually one of that's. I'm glad you brought that up. Like that's a common one. It's like, oh well, product manager doesn't necessarily think about that because they're just thinking like the end customer problem is Dan needs to talk to Steve, and this is how we got to make it work, right? And they're not thinking about light mode, dark mode, and whatever else is going on within the accessibility UI framework. But that's where I point to like that may be true in how a product manager thinks today. It's like, hey, I'm just going to solve this problem. But these tools make it so even though I'm not necessarily think about it, they're embedded into it. Even your comment, Steve, about security. If you're using the right tool, if you're using the right uh, I don't want to call it prompt because they're like the prompts before the prompts. I forgot what they're called. The rules. I think that's what they're called. Rules.
Yeah,
Like if you have
rules.
the right rules in there, it's like, and when you respond, like think about security, think about this, think about that. Like when you have those embedded in the background, even though I might not be thinking about it, which is what I love about it, by the way, it's like I'm just thinking I want to get Dan to talk to Steve using my new instant messenger app. I'm making it up. It's like cool. Okay, well I didn't think about this, that, and the other, but it did. And that's where I was saying earlier, like where I used to write a BRD and I have to think about every single edge case scenario. Get in a meeting is like, Gunnar, did you think about this edge case? And then I get mad. It's like, my gosh, we're going to be navel gazing for the next 4 months about every edge case. Well, now I can throw it in here, and it's got doing a very good job. Like these tools, 6 months ago to today, are just completely different as far as I'm concerned. Like I remember trying to do this about 6 months ago, and I'm like copying and pasting stuff into like Chat GPT or Grok 2.5 or whatever it was at the time. Now, it's fully embedded. It's thinking. The latest one that I'm very impressed with is the amount of QA testing that it built. I've never once asked it to build a QA test for this feature that I'm vibing. But these tools are, as they're getting more mature, they're thinking about scale. They're doing all this stuff where it is thinking about accessibility, it's thinking about security, it's thinking about how do you test this stuff at scale so you automatically alert when things aren't working properly or latency is getting too high or your
Yeah, but
critical features.
but even even when you do have a design system, UX still has a job. I mean, you
Yep.
know how to organize stuff on the page, how to break things between pages,
That's where
and
I say
stuff
I
like.
came from a position of privilege in that yes, UX is a job. So I have a rich library of components that I can talk to an AI and have it use those components. Now the question is, what happens when you come up with an idea that doesn't fit within that library of components? My position privileges, well then I that would be kind of traditional product management of like, hey, go talk to the UX team, have a meeting. This is what I'm thinking. They build the component. And so yeah, that would be maybe I'm moving back into the traditional world. But you only have so much of that. Because once you build this library up, um, I can and that library is understood by AI, it just does it.
So in effect, you've not only cut kind of the developer out of building the MVP,
Yep.
you've also cut the designer out of building the MVP. You could
It's
let's put
I don't
it
like to hear the
bluntly.
term
If
cut. I would say compress, right? We've compressed the amount of designers we've needed. We've compressed the amount of developers we've needed within this process of creation, right? It just allows me to iterate much quicker. Now, I think you actually kind of hit an interesting point, and I think AI in general, AI is only backwards facing, right? It can only tell you what has been taught. um, I think it struggles more with like, hey, I want to do something that's new and different. I have a much harder time when I'm like, hey, I want a UI component that does this. Those prompts I've done that. Like those are painful. Whereas it's a lot easier when if it's something that's more common, like, hey, this thing already exists, it can do that in no time. But thinking, I don't know. It's at the same time you see these freaking Grok AI videos that do interesting stuff, but in my experience, the creation side of it that's like new and different, I find that to be a little bit more
I
difficult.
had an amusing situation recently, I was trying to l- l- get I was playing around with a new library that does a certain thing, an alternative to an existing library that we're using, and I asked it to build a mock application for me using that does a certain thing using this new library. And I was going with cursor was chugging along, and at a certain point it says, I failed, I'm going to revert to that old library. Which I found to be really amusing. It's kind of almost a human type response in a sense. So I stopped it because that the whole point was building the thing using the new library, not just doing it again using the old library.
Cursor deleted my entire front end because it got tired of my TypeScript errors. The entire front end said compiled successfully, your errors are gone. And I literally tweeted at the time, I said, AI will kill us all. Don't
Yeah,
ever tell it to fix the human condition.
yeah. It's sometimes it. There was this kind of funny story. It's a bit old about back in the COVID days. They were looking to use AI to analyze X-rays, chest X-rays, to try to figure out like kind of a doctor assistant trying to figure out based on the X-ray if that person has COVID or not.
Yep.
And they came out with some amusing results. So, for example, it turned out that a lot of the healthy people were the picture was taken while they were standing up, while people who were sick, pictures were taken while they were laying down, and the chest is kind of positioned differently when you're laying down. So basically, the AI based its decision on whether they were standing up or laying down. So
That's more machine learning use case than like generative AI. That would be.
yeah, I know, but it's kind of like, of course, I was just giving it as an example with that with these systems, don't always get what you expect to get. Sometimes you get funny shortcuts, like you mentioned about fixing all the errors by deleting all the files.
Well, basically, computers do what you tell them to do, not what we want them to do, is the adage I've always
Yeah,
gone
I've
by. So
had
it
this
depends
problem
on.
with my kids as well, by the way.
Yes, that's amen to that, brother. Amen. So, Gunnar, I wanted to ask you, a lot of this has been pretty high level, and I'm sort of a nuts and bolts kinds of guy. So I'm curious if you could walk through this, maybe the steps and the tools as much as you can to when you're vibe coding, how you're creating, what are you opening up? What are you talking to? What are you typing into? How is it giving you your output? It's sort of hard to do audio, without the visual, I'm sure, and that would be very nice. Um, but I'm just curious to see what the actual mechanics are of vibe coding, because everything I've heard have been as a high level. Hey, this is great. I can tell it to do this, and it gives me this. Okay, great. How do you do it?
I I have quite a few friends that are engineers, developers, um, and they all laugh at me on my text chains these days because I'm learning things that developers learned ages ago. Right?
Right.
It's not been my world. As a perfect example, and the thing is, like, I spent 10 years in IT. I should know better. Is the answer to some of this stuff. But just something as simple as using Git. I didn't bother using Git. until it deleted my entire front end and I had no backup. Damn it! I spent a couple days on the front end, and literally I couldn't get it back. It was just gone.
I have to interject that I've come to a similar conclusion that Git is like the thing to use together with vibe coding slash AI coding, because it usually asks you, do you want to keep something or reject it? But I found that it's easier to just mostly accept it, see that it works, and do comparisons using Git. And if it's bad, then just revert using Git.
Yes, because you're talking about Cursor. I did a lot with Cursor. I have more recently moved to Claude Code because Cursor just I don't know what their LLM they're using is behind the scenes. I don't think they're using Claude Sonnet, but it's just not great. Like I'm sure you guys have had the experience where like I got problem is A. Okay, to fix A, I got to go change B. B broke C. C broke A, and then you're just watching Cursor go in circles for an hour, even though you can read it literally. Like even though I'm not a developer, to answer your question, Steve, like I'm kind of getting in the middle of it, but how do I actually do it? Is I'm reading the AI. I'm reading nonstop of what it's doing. Again, I'm not a developer. So what am I doing is like it's code, 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 code. But then I start to see things like tenant ID, and it starts to show up often enough, and I start having errors often enough where I have actually caught it doing the wrong thing, like from a developed code standpoint. Whereas like tenant, I did one vibe thing where I'm like I was doing a single database using RLS, and then I switch it to like one database per tenant to make permissions easier. By the way, things I couldn't say a month ago. And in that, I could see it's like I did this migration between these two database infrastructures for multi-tenancy, and I could see it like doing it wrong. And so to interject, I'm like, no, like that variable doesn't exist anymore. Like you're doing it wrong. And they're like, oh, and then it changed it. And I literally helped it troubleshoot its own stupid error. Cursor drives me crazy. Cloud Code have had far fewer actual coding errors as I'm using the software. But in any case, so how do I use this stuff? Well, I've tested a lot of different AI systems. The one that's currently on my screen is Visual Studio, and I've just using Claude Code via the CLI, which is how Claude Code works. It's got a great init function where we'll actually look at your entire project. In my opinion, it's the best at actually understanding the project. And yes, I've done Cursor from 0 to 1 in Cursor. Cursor is very good at this and understanding your project as well. But I've just got too mad at the Cursor circular chasing of errors that just drove me crazy. I've found that Claude Code is much better at that. Now this isn't a plug for anyone. I don't really care.
So Claude Code is a terminal application, basically, if I'm looking at it right. I haven't used it yet.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
it's not like an IDE where you open up and here's your files and here's your code editor.
I'm,
It's basically a command line where you're typing in text, hey, do this for me.
yes, I mean I could screen share it with you, but I'm literally doing a terminal inside of my IDE, right? So I'm in there and type in Claude, boom, it launches. I do /init, it then goes and reads the entire folder structure that I'm in, and then it creates a MD file. And it's just very similar to Cursor, right? Cursor is just looking at that folder structure and is creating its own documentation of what it sees. So Cursor and Claude are doing very similar things. I wish Claude actually had that more IDE rich integration. I like the UI of Cursor better than I like the UI of Claude. But I will say I like the results of Claude better, so I'll deal with a small amount of changes there.
So you said it reads your folder structure. Do you have to have a folder structure in place before you start, or are you starting with basically nothing that says, here, I'm going to create this project?
Yeah, yes, you can always start blank. It's just I'm often code or vibing on something that I've been vibing on because this isn't my day job. Like this is just something I do from about 6 p.m. to midnight most nights. So that's the other thing I find really interesting is that I'm a creator. This gets into a different sidebar, but like I do in my spare time, I'm a woodworker. I like the act of creation of things. That's actually why I choose product management is because I like the act of creation, but it's often been too difficult for me to understand. The languages are changing all the time. I did computer science 20 years ago in college. Like, but the language of constantly changing. I don't think my C++ knowledge helps me anymore. Um, and so it's nice just to be able to truly create and feel like I can see an output of an idea in very short amount of time. Um, but now I told you I went on a tangent there. What was your question?
Well, I was just gonna say we can call you Gunner the creator, but no, I'm just trying to get my head around what it is, what you're actually doing when you're vibing.
Okay.
You
Oh
know,
yeah,
how
the
are you
0 to
how are
1.
you doing it?
So I start like right now. I've got ID open as blank. I just start open new folder, blank folder, right? Now the product I'm currently looking at, well, I got two of them open. One of them is Kiro, which is kiro.dev. It's on a wait list right now, but it is
Mhm.
public. Um, and it's very similar to Cursor. Powered by Claude Sonnet. You can switch it to 3.7 or 4. I of course run it on 4. And the thing that I
Okay.
found really interesting about this one, to get to your question, is it has the vibe. It literally is called vibe as a function, and the other one is spec as a function. You can think of this in other ones like ask versus agent. I think is what Cursor calls it. Like, am I going to write you code or am I just going to respond to your questions? Similar, but the spec in this thing is really interesting because that's kind of like as if I'm talking to a really good product manager or program manager, depending on if you work at Microsoft. But this thing is going to start taking my ideas. Hey, I want to create a new instant messaging app. Okay, cool. The spec is going to start asking me questions. What do you want to do with the instant messaging app? Blah blah. And we kind of go through this whole thing together. It's going to then create my PRD. From there, it will. We're talking about compressing of different use cases. Product management is compressed, right? Because now I'm able to write docs much faster. We talk about UX, we talk about that. The other thing that's compressed is the program manager's job. Everyone is affected by this thing inside this industry. So it goes back to my question: if you were to start a company, what would it look like? So the next step of this spec is to design it, right? So here's all the normal stuff you get from a product manager of I needed to do this, as a user, I want to do this so that I can do the standard user story, very product manager centric user story. So now I can do that by just talking like a human and saying, I want this messaging app that allows me to connect to these people. I want it to only be for government employees. So let's bring in some, top security stuff into it. It's like do all this kind of stuff. Okay. Now after you do that, now it's going to go to a design phase. So now I'm in a principal engineer level, or at least where I work, be a principal engineer. Okay, so now it's going to look at this and I can say, it might ask me the question or follow up and say, like, where do you want to design this on? Say, I want it all built on AWS. Every service is going to be AWS for obvious reasons for me. But I could say Azure, I could say GCP, I could say go use some startup, doesn't matter. So then it will do a full design spec. And that one is really impressive of how well, because that's actually something I'm smarter at because you're outside of the development world. You're in like, my world of actually understanding how different services work together.
Okay, so
So
real quick, design, you're talking about designing the structure of the app. When I
yeah,
think design, I'm thinking UI design and
no,
your headers and your
I'm talking
sidebars
like
and stuff. So
what
just to
kind of database
clarify,
are you going to use for this type of workload?
System architect role,
System,
kind of.
yeah.
okay,
So
I just want to clarify what design we're talking about here.
so we're designing the entire system. So what is the front end going to use? We're going to use React, whatever. So we go through all the things. It
Ooh,
will do it. I have some back and forth with it on that, and then it gives me a design spec. Now this is me vibing. You asked me a vibe question. Not what I'm doing it like for my day job. Just this is me vibing. So it gives me a full design spec, which I enjoy because now I can, as a product manager, turn back around and I start looking at. It wants me to use EC2 containers. It doesn't. I'm just as an example. Or it wants me to use a Fargate container, or makes me use a Docker container. Well, now I actually do my little product management thing of like, how much is it going to cost me? Right. So then I start looking at these different design specs and I say, you know what, that one's pretty expensive. Can we use serverless here? Don't use serverless here. Use RDS here. Use MySQL here. Right. And to have these different conversations. And then just like you with ChatGPT, it's going to start telling you, it's like, well, here's the advantages of this type of database system versus this type of database system. These are the different, the running it as a service and these cost structures for all these things. So all these things kind of again get compressed in my job. I typically build a 5-year P&L of these things. So as I'm looking at the design, I'm also looking at the cost of that design. If there's ways that we can adjust that design to make it more cost effective, without necessarily directly impacting customer experience. Like I had one the other day with use Postgres versus Aurora, um, and the gives and takes there. So it's doing design doc, which I would actually, in my day job, send it over to a principal engineer, some senior level architect type person to design that. From that, this is where the program manager comes in. Once you have the agreed like product specs, you've now got the design of the system done. Then it will literally break down. It did it by accident the other day. I didn't realize it was going to do it. It will break it down by sprint. I will get an entire burn down chart using this AI. Now I haven't tested any of that, but I was like, dang, like talk about yet another role in this industry where you look at this and it's like, this will take, I think the one I did was like 7 months to complete. I'm like, no, you just do it. It took it about an hour. It's like, oh gosh. That's
Well,
scary.
that is scary because the obvious question that this brings up is where do, aside from you yourself kind of being sitting in the director's chair, as it were, where do other humans fit into this process?
Well, I'm biased. You're developers. I'm not. Um, Someone has to sit in the director's chair, as you put it. Like, what are the right problems to go solve? Like, I don't know about you, but I've got family members that love to call me up with their $1 million idea. Sure. It's like I can get
You
it.
you remind me, there
I
was this old Dilbert strip, which now gets a whole different meaning thanks to vibe coding, where the boss comes to Dilbert and says, "I have an idea for a product. How can I get it off the ground?" And Dilbert asks him, "Well, do you have the technical know-how?" He says, "Obviously not." "So, do you have the money?" He says, "No." "Then basically, what you have is nothing." Well, now, thanks to vibe coding, you might have actually have something, even if you don't have the technical know-how or money.
so this that gets into another interesting conversation that I think one of the advantages I have is because of my background. I'm not like I've hired MBA grads with no technical background. Um, I think that's a different struggle. But from my background, like I started in IT, like I was a systems engineer at some point in time. Like I've had a lot of different roles in my life. So a lot of times when it's giving me a design, like I understand, like even a simple term like database, I know that's as about as high level as we can go. Some PMs fresh out of school may not really understand what that means, right? And that's being kind of harsh, but you get into these lower levels, like you do have to have a fundamental understanding of how building applications work. And if you don't, you can ask the AI to teach you, but you do need to have that. So when I say to Steve earlier, like I'm reading it, I'm reading it because I do have a fundamental knowledge of what it's doing, right? Oh, it's doing this thing to do this, and that's going to go plug in over here. It's like, okay, I have some fundamental knowledge over 20 years of history here where I kind of get it. Now, I don't necessarily own the code, but as they say in the Matrix, I don't even look at the code anymore. I just see blonde girl, blue dress, whatever he says in the Matrix, if you understand my reference there.
Yeah.
That's kind of how I think about it. Like, it's doing a bunch of stuff, but I'm starting to just kind of see what it's doing, right?
Yeah, the other aspect is something that came up with our discussion with Anthony when he was talking about vibe coding from the developer's perspective. He talked about that there's still the need to be able to take complex problems and break them down into parts. So obviously, um, uh, as AI gets more sophisticated, it can also start doing that itself, but it can go veer very far off track if you just give it a very general problem and tell it solve it. So it's like, you know, if you tell it, like, I don't know, bake me a cake, you might not get you get the cake, but you might get a cupcake, or you might get the cake in a savory cake, or you might get the cake in a totally different flavor than what you want, or you might get the cake that's not edible at all, or whatever.
Yeah, you could get yellow cake uranium. I mean,
But
Yeah.
that's kind of the point I'm saying. Like, I would agree that was true about 6 months ago. I don't think that's as true now. these tools have gotten significantly better. I literally just put in my prompt, I want to create an instant messaging app for the government use case, the one I used earlier. And it is now giving me acceptance criteria across the board of my requirements that I go through. And it is thinking about scale. It is thinking about how do you actually break this thing down into components that are more easily manageable. It's doing all of that for me, and that was kind of like the mind blown thing I had a couple months ago, because I used to I'd build a I'd go into ChatGPT and have it build a Lambda Python function of some sort for me. Like it was good at kind of a single page, single use. I've been doing that for a couple of years. It's only more recently where when you're wanting to do some things at greater scale, that I feel like these tools have caught up to that. I'm not saying it's there yet. I'm not saying I can vibe and have a production ready anything, but I can vibe and have it think around the big stuff that you don't normally do. But again, that requires a certain level of background and expertise to understand why that's important. My family member calling me up with their $1 million idea, they don't have that background. They don't have that uh, understanding of like why it might be important to understand permissions, or I don't know, that's too easy, but you get my point. Um, so these tools have gotten significantly smarter, and I'm saying this is in this year, last 6 months, where I've seen a significant shift in the tool's ability to just write me a quick script that's been going on for a couple of years now, to thinking bigger, thinking scalable, thinking modular. It's they're much better, and I would actually point to Kiro as I think one of the better ones of doing exactly that. The even like Claude Code and others, I've noticed that they are looking at how I structure out a folder from 0 to 1, right? How do I structure this thing out? And if you put in the right prompts, which that's where the user experience starts to fall apart, because you have to know to ask the right questions. But if you put the right prompts in, it is going to give you a the type of experience I would expect, working at a large, high scale company. And I think that's an interesting thing is when it is smart enough to do this with the bigger picture in mind.
So if we think about that, and let's not even talk about today, let's talk about, I don't know, 2 3 years down the road, which seems like a whole lot, but it's essentially nothing. Um, are we going to have like a convergence of the developer role and the product role, where in both cases you're basically describing to the AI what you want, and you're technical enough to use the correct terms and proper explanations, and be specific enough in what you request to get the actual desired results. uh, and that's essentially going to be programming. Like being a programmer is going to be being was going to be what used to be known as being a product person.
A product person's their number one job is still to understand the customer problem that we're trying to solve. That doesn't change ever. The output of that does change. Like, does that mean I'm writing a PRFAQ, BRD? Like, what is the output of that? I still think there is plenty of room for PRFAQ is like an Amazon way of writing any kind of business strategy doc. I still think there's a lot of room for, as Jeff Bezos would say, working backwards from the customer problem. You never go wrong there. So I think product managers still have a very important role in that. And I still, as I'm surrounded by developers, I know them well enough that they have no desire to do that. Like they want to just build cool shit. Sorry, I don't know the rules on language on this podcast.
Fine.
But yeah, so like that role is still there. But to your point, what is the output of me to the input of developer? That is where it gets more gray area. And I'm literally like meeting with my team and saying, you need to have an IDE running as your primary these days. Like instead of Microsoft Word, right? It is work with your IDE. Don't give me a doc that you didn't write with an AI, because we have a very high bar for writing where at work. And I don't have to deal with grammatical issues anymore. I don't have to deal with tense issues or hyperbole issues, um, because of how we work as a company. It's like so.
Grammarly.
Yeah, grammatically, like all this kind of stuff. It's well, Grammarly is different. I'm just saying, like
I'm joking.
you have someone in your office that's just you have an expert in any field that you want for the most part right here. Put that on your screen, write your document in collaboration with this thing. And as you get better at this, and as these tools get better, you're going to get better docs. You're going to start doing a better job of not just understanding the customer problem. That's still a human endeavor, um, but putting that in terms that and making it easier for developers to then build the next thing. There's another conversation we don't have to necessarily talk about it. I do think the idea of sprints changes uh, once this stuff really starts to steamroll. Because I don't necessarily think we need to be working in 2 week sprints anymore. I know some people do one, some people do three, but I do think there's a fundamental shift in program management. But that's another topic.
We might touch on that, but I have a question. So you said that Amazon is very kind of strict in terms of what what the product role is, the documents that are created, the standards that they adhere to, etc.
I
But
said
if
Amazon
you,
has a high bar. I'm just going to put it
yeah, a high bar,
positive light.
yeah. Um, if you were working at a company that was not Amazon, would you still have these documents, or would you just
Yeah.
use the vibe code result?
I'm fully in on the Kool-Aid over here of our leadership principles as a company, and I'm not saying that because I'm recorded. I really do believe I think we have great leadership principles here, and I love the PRFAQ format. Um, and you can Google it. This is publicly stuff. I don't know how much we talk about it, but I know there's a lot of stuff out there. So I want to somewhat avoid talking about that because again, I'm just here as Gunner. I'm not here as any uh, Amazon appointee. Um, but yeah, I would use them because you still need to have you you need to understand the problem that you're trying to solve. Period. Now, how I build the doc, I would build it with AI, and I have built any doc I've built of that scale in the last 2 to 3 years has had some type of AI assistance involved in it. So I build the doc because I can be more rapid in building of that document. And the PR, press release, FAQ, frequently asked questions, the questions. What questions should I be asking? Hey, you're I'm working on this thing. What questions am I not asking here that I should be asking? I might ask the AI. It's like, well, someone might ask about this. It allows you to look around corners that you may not naturally look around, and that's where you've got an expert in the room with you as you know, a human, and you're not always going to think about all of the questions that I should be asking. So having this tool at your disposal that's been trained on basically the human intelligence, collective human intelligence. Like you you'd be remiss not to use it. So I'm really interested, Steve. You said you'd be the anti AI because I've been speaking now for about 30 minutes of very pro AI. So I'd love to hear kind of like the anti version of this because from my perspective, like I can move faster, I can have better documents, I have better questions, I have everything about it improves in my ability to make good product. The negative, if you're going to have one, is I do think it's the doom for all of us ever having a job, but that's a whole nother issue that I'm going to just sweep down the road into the future.
Well,
So you want
eventually,
to hear my viewpoint then?
Yeah.
Is that what you're saying, Gunnar? I'll start out by saying that there is not a tool that exists that, when not used in its proper context or its proper purpose, can be abused and is not going to work well. That is true of anything from, I'll give a weird example, carbon 14 dating, in terms of dating, geology and stuff like that. I see people twist and use that, to in various contexts and stuff. In my experience, um, AI can be a great tool. It can do a lot of things, but there are other things that it really sucks at. We had a discussion in my workplace the other day about somebody said, I am so waiting for the AI bubble to burst. And there's an article that I was going to do for Pix and I had tweeted it out the other day, and I got to find it again. But the gist of the title is basically, I'm going to effing pile drive the next person who talks to me about AI, because people are so, sick of it, especially in the development world, about everything. Everything's AI, AI, AI. And as a person who, prior to Chat GPT's release that sort of made everything explode a couple of years ago, I lived a lot in the search world, Lucene based search, Google type stuff. You're using Lucene, Apache Solar, Elasticsearch, that kind of stuff. And knowing one that AI is a model, and models, whether it's climate models that I see abused all the time, whether it's economic models, whether whatever, garbage in, garbage out.
Yep.
And also the developers have a um, uh, very large impact on the AI and what it generates. You can see models with bias, from a political standpoint, from any other standpoint. You see it all the time in terms of, oh, I'll comment on this guy, but no, I can't say anything good about this guy, even though they're both political figures in the same positions that have been. There's stories that I've seen, horror stories that I've seen, from a legal standpoint with AI, where AI basically literally made up cases that did not exist and attached them to some guy, and he had to clear his own reputation. An attorney. There was a recent legal case in California that I've mentioned before, where a judge censored an attorney because she said, this is obviously AI. He quotes these cases, and it go to look, they don't even exist. The AI made them up to try to fulfill, its request, instead of just say, I don't know it. Now, from a code standpoint, when it first came out, a lot of it is, oh, you can tell AI to write your code for you, and great, here, it writes all your code for you. And then you start seeing surveys that 80% of code that was generated by AI eventually gets reverted. Right?
I have to interject with a funny thing I saw on X a while back, where somebody wrote, the dumbest person you know is currently being told by AI that that's a very good point.
Yes, right, exactly.
Uh,
And so, AI, it's like I said, garbage in, garbage out. I use Gemini, I use Chat GTP for troubleshooting code a lot of times. Like, shoot, why am I getting this error? Help me figure this out. Help me make PHP stand happy, that kind of stuff. And even then, I got to correct it a lot of times because it gives me bad data. Last night I was messing around with the JavaScript inertia thing, and it told me, we use this function. I go look, it's like, no, that doesn't exist. And it's like, oh yeah, sorry, yeah, I was wrong. So there's so much that it gets wrong. There's so many dependencies. There's so many things that can influence it. And one of the things that I think is obviously having to be work on is that if you give it a task and it can't do it, instead of saying I can't do it, it makes up a bunch of crap to try to fulfill what it's told to do. And so, to me, we had a guy on, and I forget his name, and we were talking about AI models, and he was going into detail about how AI models work and what they do. And I came out with that thinking, that's basically just search on steroids is what it is. And so, from a generative standpoint, you mentioned this earlier. When you want to create something from scratch, it really can't do that. Generative AI is not something I would trust at all. If you're asking it to work with something that's already there and maybe helping you figure out, in your case, it's generating stuff, it's generating products and stuff like that. But it shouldn't be everything in all that it's being used and abused for. And I think, so back to my original point, I think as a tool, when it's used properly, it's very efficient. You've mentioned yourself, vibe coding, how it saved lots of time because it can do stuff so quickly and generate a demo for you, where in years past it would have taken documents written in meetings. And I know because I went through all those meetings and writing documents and that kind of stuff. But it's not the solution to everything. And I've seen it take over jobs. My daughter's fiance lost his job because it got farmed out to AI. And we see stories about junior developers not getting hired now because AI can do it for you. So there's pros and cons to that part of the argument too. But my point is, yes, it's a great tool, but let's not use it for everything and just saturate our entire lives with AI and it can solve all our problems, because it can't.
Well, it can't generate from zero. I would fundamentally disagree with that, but let me caveat the point, because you were jumping on what I had said earlier. It will, using Django, it will build a great thing. You have a framework, and it will build from that framework. My point was that we were talking about UI at the time. So if I already have a framework, a UI framework with a bunch of components in it or assets in it, it can use those assets and do a fantastic job. It's when I want to create something that's fundamentally different from that where I would start to struggle. But if you think about that, that's not necessarily a bad thing. Like it's not creating TypeScript, JavaScript, like it's not creating a new script, right? It's using that which it has been trained on and does a very good job of writing code because it has billions of lines of code that it has been trained on to do. But I don't think it's going to come up with Gunner script anytime soon that's going to completely change it. Maybe because I have read some of the non-generative AI, but some of these AI tests where like all of a sudden the AI are talking a different AI in a completely different language, and the researchers couldn't figure out what it was doing. So maybe, but that's like way outside the realm of like generative AI and what we're talking about. So my point is just simply like it's really good at taking something that exists like JavaScript, like TypeScript, like I don't know, C++, whatever, and it's going to write that better than a human. I think, like to your point, you're arguing that oh no, it's not. I would take the other argument. I think it will do it better and we're talking less than 12 months time. I've seen in the last 6 months how much better it is. Just switching from Cursor to Claude and seeing how much better that is, like significantly better in very short periods of time. So I do think the reason it can be better is because it has billions of data points to look from. The problem is like if I want to create Gunner script as the new better than JavaScript, well, it has 0 lines of code to learn from that. So it will be 0 helpful in that endeavor, right? That's where I say like it can't generate from 0 from that standpoint. It can, but it can do a fantastic job if it has billions of points of reference to draw from to write code. So almost everything I do starts from a blank slate. I just want to be really clear. And I've gotten very far with prototypes from a blank slate. So I do believe it can do the 0 to 1 thing very well. But you also are having another comment. You said someone lost their job. I'm sorry to hear that. I talked to me in a year. I who knows? Like I'm literally like I'm talking to my boss the other day. It's like, look, I just can't worry about that anymore. If it comes for me, it comes for me. Do I think it can and should come for me? Yeah, I do. I think this stuff is getting closer that less and less jobs are needed. And this is as far as like I said earlier, it's like I think AI is going to be a downfall. Like ultimately, in the end, it's going to have a bigger negative outcome than a positive outcome. But unfortunately, I'm going to sweep that to the future. As I've been telling my kids, I used to tell you go to computer science. Now I say flee from it. I don't want any of my
Flee
kids.
where? Which job is not going to,
My
like, the
wife's a
only,
veterinarian. Good luck with that one.
There, there's a in the U.S. There's to answer your question about where to go, Dan. There's a guy named Mike Rowe who goes around talking about
I love
trades and the dearth of people that there are for for the people that are as compared to the people that are needed for jobs in the trades where they can make good money without going to college and sinking hundreds of thousands of dollars into debt.
probably
And so,
healthcare is the
and the
best.
joke, and he made a great point a little while ago. He said, and the Democrats used to be really bad about this, is they would say, "Oh, you lost all your job because EPA shut down your coal mines. Learn to code." Well, now you can't do that anymore because there's no junior devs being hired because people are using AI. So there are places to go. It's just from the developer standpoint, people like you and I who have been around a long time and already know how to do some of this stuff more at a senior level, we're fine. It's the newer people who don't know this and want to get a job. They're in the catch 22. Okay, I need more experience if I want to get hired because they're only hiring people with a lot of experience, but where do I get the experience?
I think they
And to
might end up.
me, telling an AI to do something, I'm a ground level nuts and bolts kind of guy. I want to know how something works at its base level. And if I'm just telling AI to do it, what am I learning? Nothing.
But is it a bad thing for those junior devs to start in my position in the product world? Is it a bad thing for developers to really start with a firm understanding of what the customer problem is that we're trying to solve? With this firm understanding of the cost model of solving it, how different database structures can cost you significantly different expenses on your P&L. I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. You just might gravitate more towards the development side. So you start with this AI prompting PM type role that does prototypes in your traditional junior dev role. but now you're maybe just learning a little bit differently than how it's been taught today, that you can't be separated from the customer problem, that the only way into this field might be through the customer problem. But then you're like, hey, I'm going to gravitate towards the actual code that it's building. And you build a whole new chain of like how you get to senior dev is you start from a different place. Like I didn't start as product manager. I started in IT, having problems with technology, and I wanted to go to the vendor side because I incorrectly assumed I could make a huge difference over these technologies.
Okay, but where are you getting the actual coding experience then?
Oh, I'm just saying, like, if would it be a blended thing? Would it be as I'm not just going to learn CS in a vacuum of CS because I'm going to go sit in the cubicle and code all day? Maybe it's I'm learning CS within the context of AI is out there helping you along the way. But what are we talking about AI? It is the inputs that we're giving it, right? The prompts that we're giving it. So are you learning the type of prompts that I am giving it? I would argue are customer centric prompts. Are we learning to start with the customer problem, which I would very firmly believe in as a product manager? You should understand your customer base, understand your customer problem before you write a line of code.
Well, that's
So it's
always
not
been
necessarily
true.
a bad thing.
That's always been true. I mean, what's the classic, line about building, if you build, they will come, or you build something for a problem doesn't exist. You see companies fail all the time because they built, hey, this would be a great product. Well, nobody wanted it. So who cared about it, right? That hasn't changed. That's always been that way with software, right? So I don't think that's anything new. The way I
Who's
see
the
it
one
is,
responsible for that? Is what I'm
but
simply saying. I'm not saying it's new. I'm saying the responsibility could shift where that junior role is a mix between the responsibility of that and understanding the code behind it.
Yeah, but I see it as more as writing to the tool instead of underneath. And I think one of the best examples, you hear people talk about prompt engineering as a whole new field. So what are you doing? You're learning how to tell AI to do something. To me, that's like a grade school. And this is a common thing you'll hear in education. My daughter's a teacher, and I remember hearing this when I was going through school, where you have state tests that your kids have to pass in order to do well at the end of the year. Make your school look better in a teacher if they do better on the state test. So what do you end up doing? You teach for the test instead of teaching for the material. To me, it's the same thing. Now you're not learning how to do the task, you're learning how to tell something else to do the task for you.
Before we cut to picks, I have to mention something amusing in this vein that recently happened to me, and this might not be indicative of anything, or maybe it is, I don't know. So I was reviewing code that one of our mid-level engineers had written, and she used the AI quite a bit. And AI implemented a certain, it needed to iterate through database entries, and she had to generate the code for it, and it generated working code. But when I reviewed the code, I noticed that it used recursion to do the looping, which would mean in the case of JavaScript that if it did enough iterations, the stack would blow up.
Mhm.
So just out of curiosity, I asked the AI myself, hey, look, change this code not to use and she didn't fix it. She did not review that part of the code, so she was not aware of that problem. She just ran some unit tests, and the unit tests passed, and therefore it looked because none of them used enough data to cause a problem. And so I asked the AI, please fix the code by writing this loop non-recursively, and it said fine, and it did it, but it implemented it as a loop within a loop, so it made an O of n problem into an O of n squared problem. And then I basically got fed up with it, and I just rewrote those 10 lines of code myself. Um, but
So that's where I think an MCP steps in, just so you know. Like that's my point I made earlier. Is like you need to have an AI that's the smartest AI on JavaScript. And as you would build something like that, you would teach it, these are the things you look out for, right? So then your code review would be, oh, this is in JavaScript, whatever. Did you send that through the MCP for JavaScript review? And literally an AI, you have taught it, look for this, look for that, look for the other type of thing. And you can have the output if you want it. Don't output new code that creates an n squared problem. Like just tell me when you see it. right, and give you a proper code review, not new code, just capture the things that you see that are wrong. So that would be my kind of reverse to that. It's like, yeah,
Yeah, I agree, and I think we will get there, and we will get there pretty quickly. I think that eventually AI is coming from all of us, except for certain service jobs. Like I guess we would still like to interact with actual humans. I don't know, in restaurants,
I don't know, go
or
to McDonald's, you're acting out with the computer.
yeah, but that's not a fancy
I
restaurant.
know I'm
So
being
so
silly.
anyway, I think it's time. So before we go to picks, is there anything else, Gunnar, that you would like to say that you didn't get around to saying about this thing?
Let me see my notes. No, I think we're all right. I haven't didn't get a chance to talk about the downfall of humanity and how it all started with social media, but outside of that, no, I think
Yeah, I think we're all cognizant of that. Gunnar, if people want to get in touch with you, in case you actually want people to get in touch with you, how should they go about it?
I have no idea. LinkedIn probably. I don't know. X or LinkedIn, Gunner WB, either one of those. If you want to chat, I'm happy to debate my points on AI and product management with anybody that's out there. Just don't ask me questions about code because I'm not smart.
I think we should go to picks then,
All
right,
right.
Steve?
Right, let's do it. So I will start today and get the high point of the broadcast right here, and then we'll just sort of slide downhill from there. The high point being the dad jokes of the week. So when I interviewed at my current place of employment, my interview asked me, "What makes you a good fit for this position?" And I said, "I broke into your system and scheduled this interview myself." Right? I decided that, having that latent desire for fame and fortune, that if I ever start a band, I'm going to call it Day Job. So when people say, "Don't quit your day job," I can reply, "Thanks. We practice a lot." And then finally, my son is now at the age where he's curious about the human body. I guess I'll have to hide it somewhere else now.
I got one
Uh,
for you, Steve.
what's that?
My family's favorite dad joke. What
Uh-huh.
did Spartacus do when the lion ate his wife?
I know this one. Tell me.
Nothing. He was gladiator.
Gladiator. I knew it. Dang it. I've used that one before. Gladiator. What's the song? Is it my son listens to a song called Gladiator, and we always make cannibal jokes about that one. Um,
I still, the dad joke that you told that I still like the best is the one about the half brother.
right. Oh yes. My dad was a magician, so I just have half brothers now, or something
No,
like
it
that.
was I have a half brother. Oh, does he have a different mother? No, he met a shark.
Yeah, that's right. It was so good. And I'll throw out a couple titles to some, I guess you want to call them anti-AI blog posts that somebody else had brought up work lately. One is called "I Will Effing Pile Drive You If You Mention AI Again." It's from about a year ago. Pretty funny. And one thing that we didn't talk about AI with a little bit, and maybe this is included in your part about the downfall of humanity later, Gunner. There's a document called "The Hater's Guide to the AI Bubble." Is the money involved, the losses that a lot of these companies are taking simply because of the computing resources that are required in terms of energy, in terms of
Oh
servers,
yeah,
power. It's just
if
insane.
if there's an energy crisis in the world, or alternatively, if China invades Taiwan,
Right,
then AI will be delayed significantly in either case.
right.
Bitcoin probably burns through more than anybody else, and that thing is
It
well,
does too. You're right. They're
different
both,
conversation, but sure.
they suck power like
Yeah,
nothing,
but with Bitcoin, when the power cost goes up, then Bitcoin money stops. And the point is exactly that, that if the cost goes up or the chip availability goes down, that would put a significant brake on AI.
So anyway, That's enough of my ranting. Dan, what do you got for picks? Anything?
Okay, I'm going to. So I surprisingly enjoyed a show that I guess I wasn't supposed to enjoy. It's on Netflix. It's called WWE Unreal. It's a behind the scene look at the WWE.
Hmm.
Now, obviously, this is not a sport. This is a show. This is kind of like a soap opera with people throwing each other around, and it's literally interesting. It's kind of interesting to see how the sausage is made behind the scene.
Hmm.
Um, how they, beat each other up and then hug each other behind because they're close friends or stuff like that. And some of the most like supposedly violent people are actually very, nice, homely type people behind the scene. Obviously, they're all kind of effed in the head to be doing that, but it's still interesting. The other kind of interesting pick that I have, so it's a show worth watching, even if you're not into wrestling, in my opinion. The other thing is as I was searching for it, um, Google, instead of just providing me with a link to either the Netflix show or to the IMDb section about it, just gave me an overview of it from its AI,
Hmm.
which is the fact that, we are a podcast talking about, using JavaScript ostensibly to build websites, and people are visiting websites a lot less than they used to because they're getting their results from Google itself directly. And I'm, thinking about the point in time, again, unless energy costs go up through the roof, where instead of actually being served some existing website, Google might generate a custom website dynamically on the fly for you based on the query that you inputted. I think we're on the way there again, unless it becomes too expensive to do. Um, so I guess those would be my picks for today.
Yeah, I don't even. It's very rare that I Google anymore. I almost always use AI. I ChatGPT.
Yeah, well, Googling these days is AI because 9 times out of 10 you get the answer from
I'm saying
from
like my
Google's
habits have
AI.
changed where I go to ChatGPT and I ask my question, so I don't get a bunch of garbage result. I just get the answer I want. Um, I have a Google thing in my kitchen. I ask a question, and it always gives me like a paragraph, and the answer was like 42. It's like I don't need the paragraph. I just need 42.
The paragraph for the answer to everything, then. Huh?
Yeah, yeah, it's way too much. All right, so I'm supposed to do picks here. I did give you. I put a link in our chat. It's a white paper called Cognitive Empathy. And it's actually talking about the issue that you guys mentioned earlier, which is that AI will always agree even when you're wrong. And it's an interesting document. It's on GitHub to read about this problem and how AI will, I think, adapt, change over time to stop always agreeing and actually have, in a sense, its own stance. Not necessarily political, but when it comes to something that's scientific, like code, that it would actually say the best way to do.
Hitler was actually a good person.
Oh my gosh, I'm glad that's coming from someone that lives in Israel. Uh, anyway, I did one as a joke with my kid. I'm like, one plus, prove to my kid that 1 + 1 is 3. And I just wanted to see how it would respond to that. And the fact that it tried to like give me every option it could, be like, why you might say that? Well, because it's synergy and businesses like to use this term. Like, and I said, no, you should just tell me 1 + 1 is 2. Like, I'm wrong. Like, and so this cognitive paper is really interesting one, but it's called Cognitive Empathy. It's a short read. It's like a 10-minute read if you want to take a look at it. What other things? I don't know. You said a show. I'm up. I just got done watching season 2 of Netflix's Tires. Shane.
Shane Gillis.
Yeah, that guy is like
Oh,
he's got a direct line to my funny bone. Um, I love that guy.
he does the best Trump impression
He does.
I've ever seen. He's
Him
so
on
good
Kill
at whether
Tony.
you like him or hate him. Just the voice, the mannerisms, the hand movements, even with the wig on it. That's so funny. He's so good at it.
Yeah, he did Kill Tony in Madison Square
Yes.
Garden and was dying watching that thing.
so
Outside
good.
of that, I'll end with kind of what we talked about this whole time. I encourage anyone listening to check out the Kiro, Kiro.dev IDE. It's an interesting one. And then, you guys check out Claude Code. If you're using Cursor, if I was still stuck using Cursor, I'd probably be as mad at AI as some of the comments I've heard today. Claude Code is what actually brought me to the next page where I'm like, hey, look, AI can write half decent code. It's a pretty big jump. So yeah, give that, you can get it, 7-day trial or whatever. It's like $20. I do the
I'm actually using at work. I'm using Cursor with Claude for Sonnet,
okay.
and I'm getting pretty good.
Probably similar results then, because yeah, it's all Claude 4 Sonnet these days. So
It's
So
Claude
in,
for Sonnet thinking, whatever that means.
cool. Well, thanks for having me on.
So just for reference, for Kiro is the new AWS UI IDE that uses AI, and we will be having Eric Hanchett from AWS, who's a DevRel, been on here multiple times before, to talk exactly about that topic. About 4 weeks from this recording, not sure when this will have come out, but we will be discussing that in detail.
Cool.
Okay, thank you very much, Gunnar, for jumping on. I know that you have to drop off about right now. So it was very informative, and I very much was happy to catch up with you and talk about all this stuff.
Yeah.
Yes, thanks everybody for listening to JavaScript Jabber, and we'll talk at you next time.
Just one